I won't wait too long. I don't imagine there'll be too many people showing up, but it's all good. It's all good because people will eventually see the video and they'll watch it or they won't. And that's all cool. But for when you do watch it, hey guys, how's everybody doing? This is Peter Branscombe. I'm living in occupied Canada. Probably talking really low too. Sorry. Peter Branscombe in occupied Canada. So let me play something here. Something that our education minister said, I don't know when it was pretty recently. Nobody voted for him, I don't believe. He just was appointed. Where is that? Somewhere I will find you. There we go.
People want to choose to make a decision that is against it in keeping the unvaccinated people out of school, out of hospitals, out of our government offices. People want to choose to make a decision that is against their community's best interest and against their own. They can choose to not participate in those activities where everyone else has decided that you'd like to actually, if you don't mind, not die of water disease. Keeping the unvaccinated people out of school.
So that's Dominic Carty, and he's saying, you know, we've got to keep the unvaccinated out of our schools, out of our public office, out of our blah blah, out of society. I mean, if they don't want to partake in what everybody else is doing, frankly, then that who doesn't want to die, get really sick, then they'll just have to be cut out of society, right? And he just said it just I mean, what else can we do, people? What else can we do? I know what we can do to you, Dom. But your day's coming. Your day's coming. And it won't be from my hand or anybody like that. It'll be from somebody that just gets turned loose. And it'll be a bad thing. I mean, nobody likes this man. Nobody liked him before all of this. And now because of all of this now and how he's just his, little Napoleon complex has just grown to that's thing. Napoleon, at least he was a general that could fight and knew what he was doing. This guy is just a little weasel. Really, is what he is. He's a nerd boy who got made fun of his whole life. But he never quite got that whooping that he should have got. The one that really sets him straight. He never got that. He got made fun of, so it was enough to, build a inner rage, a deep-seated rage, so that one day, he could fulfill his revenge of the nerds type delusional fantasy. Right? He just didn't quite get smacked hard enough. Maybe not quite enough wedgies, swirlies, stuffed in enough lockers. I mean, he doesn't look like a very large man, so he looks like you'd be able to, you'd be able to compress him down in one of those lockers, no problem. Probably was his home. It was probably his home room. When they did roll call, they just walked by his locker. Dom, here. All right, Dom, you stay in there. I bet you the teachers even didn't like him. No, I shouldn't be like that. but I feel like that he's I really think that's an evil man, the way he carries on, and he's just so he believes it when he says it, right? That's the thing. That's what's scary about an individual like that. He's not scary, but he feels that he's got all the power and authority behind him, that he's going to tell you what can be done with your children and what can go into the bodies of your children, right? He's the education minister, and he says that, well, they're not your children, they're the province's children. Yo, Armchair, what's up, buds? What is up? Just talking about our favorite Dominic Carty, education minister in New Brunswick. He's a real cheeky fellow. So I was going to talk about Adam Green tonight, but I was thinking about it hard today, and I'm going to go and do my thing with him, but I'm not going to spend as much time as maybe I could, because he's really not that important. What's more important is that he's leading a lot of people astray. I'd say a lot of young people. I'd say a lot of Adam Green's fan base is probably the younger kids, younger generation. I mean, he has this great big long beard and long hair, and he thinks he's this Viking, right? And then thinks he's Viking Jesus, right? He's got his little No More News picture where he's, Viking warrior, right? I don't know if the dude's ever been in a fight in his life. Seems pretty frail. I know he played basketball. I've seen those videos, so he's pretty athletic, but I don't know. I don't think he's a Viking warrior. I don't think. And then he's got his little Trinity symbol, right? The spiral Trinity. It's funny because he spends so much time mocking Christ and God and the Holy Spirit, but yet he's got his own little Trinity symbol. That's funny. Really funny. It's funny that he tries to replicate his appearance as if he's Jesus, right? And as if what he looks like is what Jesus looked like. Long-haired guy with friggin' long shaggy beard. You don't know if that's what Jesus looked like. He thinks that Cesare Borgia, right? Cesare Borgia Jesus, Vidal Sassoon Jesus, he thinks that is what Jesus looked like. And so he tries to replicate that, or he thinks that his fan base, no disrespect to people that follow Adam, but his fan base, I've seen them make message to him talking about, oh, you look like Jesus. And he's, oh, no. And I don't know. I think something like that, you should immediately rebuke that, because first of all, you don't know what Jesus looked like. And second of all, he didn't look like Adam Green. And I'm not going to go too far into who Adam actually is and everything like that. I'm going to get into basically the biblical aspects of it, because if you want to look on somebody that's done a little bit of a deep dive on Adam Green, I'd go to Enigma Report. He hasn't done many videos on Adam for a while, but there was a while ago he made some pretty good videos going in depth talking about Adam and Adam's past and what he might be linked with and so on and so forth. And it's that's more that side of things, which is very much entirely plausible, which goes along with what's his name there, Dave Goldberg, that video. The guy that came out and said that this Adam Green guy was literally going to be used as a controlled opposition to bring a bunch of people into this idea and this thought process where basically they would end up being on a federal watch list, right? Because what's he doing? Right? What's he doing? He's stirring up a particular group of people, right? That's what his whole thing is now. He started out being his all, meek and mild and humble Adam. And then with a shaky voice, he started going into Zionism, right? And then since going against Zionism and Kabbalism and whatnot, he since has moved off Kabbalism, and his main target lately has been Christianity, ideally the basically deity of Jesus, right? The gospel of Jesus Christ, the person of Jesus Christ, the godhood of Jesus Christ, right? The God man. And let's be honest, his knowledge on the Bible, it's not very strong. He gets all of his knowledge on the Bible based on people who also don't believe the Bible, right? He gets his knowledge on the Bible based on Jewish scholars, right? Who don't believe the Gospels anyways, or secular scholars who don't believe any of the Bible, or atheists, right? Or Gnostics, right? That's what he does, but he doesn't actually go to anybody that actually believes the Bible, right? And preaches the Bible. He won't get into that because he can't actually hold his own in that realm. So he gets all these people that don't really know the Bible that well anyways. They just use the Bible for their own purposes, right? They use the Bible when they want to use it, but then they discard it for everything else, right? And that's the worst. That's the absolute worst, right? Piggybacking off of God's word and then snickering and ixnaying it over there. Like, how sneaky and pathetic is that? It's pretty pathetic. Pretty real pathetic. So Adam's been going hard on Christ, right? And you know what? Adam, that's your thing, right? See, Adam does tell a lot of truth. And he mixes it with a lot of lies too. A lot of untruths. Because he's trying to muddy the water, right? And he's trying to turn people away, young people especially, away from their first love, which is Christ, and into this new age Gnosticism. That's what he's doing, right? Because that's what he truly is. He's a new age Gnostic. Because he always came out as, well, I went to church and I know the gospel and the basics behind the Bible and stuff like that. But he would never really commit to what he believed in and stuff, right? And he still, I don't know if he does now. I don't really watch any of the stuff. But I've just seen the last few things, and I've seen some of the other things in the past and whatnot. And I could see that he was heading down this road. And sure enough, look where he's at. And he's got Chris Perkins and Albert Bashai, right? And the three of them, they make this trinity, right? This trinity of fools, because they all play on each other. They all support everything that each other says, right? And they're just right, like a lot of their audience, they were willing, I will say, they were willing to basically cut half their audience, right? Because they'd have a lot of Christians that follow their stuff because it was about Zionism and whatnot. And then all of a sudden they just flipped, but I knew it was coming. And now they just go hog wild in Christianity, right? And try to make Christians look stupid, right? But there's so many ways that the devil has tried to infiltrate the church and infiltrate Christianity that you can point to a lot of different areas where Christianity has failed, or where Christianity is doing the exact opposite of what its commission is, right? You can see Jewish infiltration. You can see satanic infiltration, right? You can see other denominations and their infiltration and the occult infiltration. You can see all these infiltrations. Why? Because it's a institution, okay, that is on this earth that is made up of men. Okay? It's been commissioned by Christ, right? Christ is the head, but the churches are made up of autonomous churches in all the towns and all the cities and all the places, right? The shires and so on and so forth, all the townships. So every church is autonomous, right? But they all act in accordance to what the head says, which is Christ. Now, are you going to have over the years variations? Are you going to have splits, right? As places grow, you're going to have denominational splits. You're going to have places going here. You're going to have different kind of ideas and the way people want to go about things happen over here. And you're going to have these splits. You're going to have these theological splits. People are going to think differently on things, right? In Revelation, it talks about the seven churches. All those churches, well, they did things right and they did things wrong. Some of them did the same things as other churches did. Some of them did the same wrong things that other churches did. But all those churches were different churches that had different qualities about them and different shortcomings. Some of them were really good churches and some of them were really bad, right? Laodicea, especially, right? Lukewarm, vomit out of God's mouth, right? But all of them also had infiltrators. Who? Well, it says the Nicolaitans. Who are the Nicolaitans? The Nicolaitans were those that went to church, but they, partied, they got drunk, they fornicated, they, slept around, they lived like the world, right? They did everything that the world would do, right? But also pretended to be Christian, right? So they lived in extravagance, right? They lived worldly, so to speak. Well, that's what they did. They lived worldly. What else was there? There was a prophetess, right, that had the men commit fornication, right, and to eat meat sacrificed unto idols. So you have different things infiltrating. You have women infiltrating churches, right, taking over roles in leadership and bringing in all these different kind of doctrines. You see that today. You have the synagogue of Satan that is tempting the church, right? Those who say they're Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Adam always basically talks about the Jews and everything's about, how bad the Jews are and that the Jews are, absolutely wicked and that they're leading the New World Order. But the thing is there Jews that are part of it? Yes. Is there Gentiles that are part of it? Yes. Right? Are they trying to kill Jews? Yes. Are they trying to kill Gentiles? Yes. We're all a target by them. We're all a target. You understand that? And who's a target? Those who would believe on the Lord, right? Those who will not go along with the beast system, which we are in the, basically the preamble of, right? We're in the birth pangs of. We're in the beginning of sorrows. But you get to understand that it says in Revelation that there's going to be Jews, a remnant of them, that are going to turn to Christ and they are going to repent and they're going to turn back to the Lord. So can we hate the Jews? No, can't hate the Jews, because are all Jews communists? No. Are all those that are, we know that in the cemetery in Israel, there is a section for Moses Hess who pushed labor socialism, right? So there is this whole thing that is taking place, right? Where Israel is going to be at the center of all things. But that's going to come after what we're seeing today, right? This here is all kind of a buildup where a lot of people have to die. A lot of the old world has to be destroyed. in order to make way for this new world order, right? And then when the new world order is in place, well, then that is when the Antichrist will emerge, because the Antichrist is first going to come with technology, with many signs and wonders, things that are going to be making the people want to worship him, right? And he's going to have a false prophet that's going to say, this is the guy, right? And it even says that the Antichrist, the beast, he's going to get a wound to the head and he's going to be resurrected. Okay? So he is the story of the dying God, right? Audio cut. He done. Did it? So that is the example of the dying God. Okay? The Antichrist is the dying God, the dying and rising. Okay? The sun is a picture of that. Sun goes down, sun comes up. Well, who is the true representation of death and resurrection? Jesus Christ, right? Died, power of the earth, 3 days, resurrected unto the Father. Seen by many. All good revelation. No worries, bud. No worries. So, the Antichrist, if he dies and is resurrected, is he not going to be seen as God? Right? Right? That's what Revelation says. See, Adam Green pushes this theory that Jesus Christ is the story of the dying God. He's just an adaptation of that. And where did he get that from? He got that from, what was it called? Someone in the chat say it. What was that movie? Where at first they did all like the gods and who Jesus was, and this is Osiris and this is Horus, and they were this, and this culture had the story of Jesus, and this story, what was that? Not the Matrix. You know what I'm saying. You guys know what I mean. And they did a redux to it. Da Vinci Code? No. I think there was a lot of basically the information they got for this came from the Da Vinci Code. Because why? Because Dan Brown was an occultist. He knew all about the occult thing. So he tried to basically say that the church was behind it, but it was occult stuff. No, I can't remember. Anyways, that's where he gets it from. It was from a whole documentary where a lot of people seen it and people still reference to it. And usually most people that talk about Christ as being just a representation of the dying God from all the other mythologies, they all get it from this same video that's about basically the Great Reset. And at the very beginning, it has this 10-minute thing about how the Bible is false and Christ is basically the end of Pisces and we're going into the age of Aquarius kind of idea, right? And he was the idea of the day. But Adam Green, he'll take all these things like that and he'll try to say that that's where the Bible gets its idea from. But the whole idea is that the Bible is the inspired word of God. It says that inspired means breathed. God breathed, right? Because he spoke the world into existence. He spoke creation into existence, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. God spoke it. He said, let there be light. Big Bang, if you want to call it that, right? But God initiated it by saying, let there be light. So the Bible takes all the mythologies, okay? The Bible takes all of the ideas and concepts that man has made, and it actually condenses them down in a truthful book, okay? And it is basically the testimony, complete testimony, the Genesis and Revelation of Jesus Christ. Because it says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. So it says, second here. God said, let us make man in our image. Verse 26 of Genesis chapter 1. Make man in our image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given thee. Anyways, so it says, let us create man in our image. Well, who's our image? Well, he's talking about the angels. No, he's not talking about the angels, okay? Because the angels are not created in God's image, right? And whenever you see an angel in the Bible, they're always absolutely terrifying, and they're never in the image of man, right? Sometimes they might come in a different form, right? They might come in the form of a man, but when they are of their heavenly form as an angel, they are not looking like a man, because their descriptions are completely different than what a man's description is, okay? And I don't got a description here right in front of me. If I get there at some point in time, we'll talk about some of these. Someday I'll do a video or a stream talking about different angels and how they actually appear, right? And again, they're not usually, they don't look like, a white guy with blonde hair, right? That's kind of like the image of Lucifer, right? When people think of Lucifer. Or He-Man, right? So God created them in his image, right? Well, who's in the image of God? Well, Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is Lord, and Jesus Christ came and lived as a man. He was the Word who became flesh, okay? So we are created after God's own image, just as God's Son, Jesus Christ, was created after God's image. And he was with God from the very beginning, because it says in Revelation, because this is Genesis, like I said, and in Revelation, he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, right? I'm the first and the last. So he's the Lamb that was slain from the foundations of this world, right? So you got to understand that Jesus Christ has always been there. But Adam Green, they'll say that Jesus Christ was a concept that came later, right? As this, fake fulfillment. Well, I'm telling you, if someone can implant all that in this and be as consistent as they are in this over a period of, that's the thing, this was put together 1611, right? But they weren't written in 1611, right? This book contains the history of known civilization, right? There's places that were just discovered in the last 100 years that they didn't know actually existed, except it being in the Bible, right? An example is the Hittite Empire, right? They didn't believe that the Hittites were actually a powerhouse at one point in time. And then they actually found the Hittite kingdom, which was Hattusha. And anyways, like Jericho, they found Jericho. Sodom and Gomorrah, they found Sodom and Gomorrah, right? They found all these places. They're all real places, right? Egypt is a real place, right? All the empires of the world history are in this. The only places that aren't in here, and it even does mention them, because it mentions the isles from afar off, right? And the peoples of the sea, right? So it does mention people from other places, right? But it mainly has to do with, obviously, Middle East, right? Because that was the area that it was written. But it records all that history. And it records pre-flood history, right? And it records the post-flood. And it records basically the dawn, the cradle of civilization in Babylon, right? The cradle of civilization, that's what we're always taught in school. And lo and behold, the first city built after the flood where they all gathered together was Babylon, right? So that's where Abraham came out of, the Ur of Chaldees. He came out of the Ur of Chaldees and then went down into Canaan, seen the promised land, had a dream, was told that he was going to go in Egypt and he was going to stay there, and basically they would remain in Egypt for 400 years, 400 plus years or whatever, until the iniquity of the Amorites, the people who were in the land of Canaan, was fulfilled. And then at that point in time, the Hebrews would have been made a powerhouse, right? Because this is the crazy part, right? Abraham was told, you're not going to go, you've seen it, you're not going to go there yet. You're going to end up in Egypt, right? You're going to end up in Egypt before you ever get back here, right? And what happened? Abraham had Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael created the Arab nations. Isaac had Jacob and Esau, right? Esau, Edom. Jacob had 12 sons, right? One of them was Joseph. What happened to Joseph? Threw him down the well, and then he got sold to slavers, taken to Egypt. Became a worker for the Pharaoh, right? And eventually became a seer for the Pharaoh, and ended up being named basically Pharaoh's right hand man, a prince of the province. Okay. Time of famine came. They had the 7 years of plenty where they gathered, and then they had the 7 years of famine, right? Then after that, is everything still going? Then after that, 7 years of famine. During the 7 years of famine, that's when his brothers came to Egypt. Because everybody was coming to Egypt because Egypt had all the food. Everywhere else had no food. They're coming to Egypt, right? There's Joseph. They don't know it's Joseph. They haven't seen him in years since they threw him down the well, right? So when they go, he reveals to them, after a couple things take place, right? And they end up staying in Egypt, right? And then the house of Joseph, right? The children of Israel end up populating, and the Hebrews become a very large group of people inside of Egypt. And at one point in time, while Joseph was alive, right? They lived well in Egypt. But after Joseph died, they ended up forgetting about Joseph and all he'd done. And then the next thing you see is a bunch of people coming up and saying, there's way too many Hebrews here. They're gonna take over. right? So then Pharaoh said, well, we got to kill them. We got to kill the firstborn. We got to start culling them, right? That's what Pharaoh did. He started culling the population. And what happened? Moses got sent away, right? And he was taken in by one of Pharaoh's daughters, right? And he ended up being raised in the house of Pharaoh, right? And he was a goodly child. So it specifically mentions that he was good looking from the time he was a baby, right? I'm not saying anything, right? But there's a general stereotype that certain people are not the most attractive at times. And so they specifically mentioned how good looking Moses was, right? As to, I assume, to blend in, right? To blend in with the Egyptians. So he's with the Egyptians, everything happens there. He grows up, finds out what's going on, ends up killing an Egyptian, ends up going and living in the tents of Midian, for years. And then, gets called to the mountain of God. Burning bush, goes back to Egypt, confronts Pharaoh, right? He's timid at first. God says, do what I ask you to do, and it's all going to be good. Just, he gives him exact directions, like go into Pharaoh, take your staff, hit it on the ground, and say this, right? I'll take care of it. So does the judgments on Egypt, final judgment, creeping death, right? The angel of the Lord comes, blood on the posts, right? I'm getting into too much detail and I'm dragging this out. This is all talking about Abraham, okay? Abraham had a dream about all this. This is the iniquity of the Amorites being fulfilled, okay? All this time has to take place, right? They had to go into Egypt. All this stuff had to happen. The generations of people that came up, all this to come to this point for something that was told to Abraham like hundreds of years before, right? So creeping death comes. Every house in Egypt is hit by this, and any Israelites that didn't put the blood on their doorposts and lentils. So basically Pharaoh says, okay, get out, right? And they basically loot Egypt, right? And they throw all the gold and get out of here, right? And so they leave with treasure and tons of stuff. They leave Egypt. And then, Pharaoh ends up having, second guessing himself and getting quite upset now that he doesn't have anything and he let them go. And, he's not really feeling like God anymore, right? Because God hit Pharaoh in all the manners in which Pharaoh believes he is God, right? He hit the water, he hit the food supply, he hit the grain, the animals, he hit the people, right? He put boils on them, right? He caused darkness, right? And the Pharaoh, he's supposed to be a light, right? He's supposed to be the son of Ra, right? The sun shines upon him, right? He's an example of the dying God legend, right? And God dismantled him, and he used Moses to carry it out, right? And God did great things through Moses, right? Moses did great things in the Lord. So they leave Egypt. Pharaoh chases after them. When they're leaving, they're following cloud of smoke by day, because they don't know where they're going, right? Following the cloud of smoke by day, pillar of fire by night. Get to the Red Sea. Pharaoh's pressing on them. Moses separates the sea, right? They travel through, crush. Pharaoh chases them. He crushes the armies of Pharaoh in the sea, right? There's geological maps, imagery. It shows that there's a section in that sea that's basically like a sandbar. It's way more shallow than the rest of it. Still deep. Don't get me wrong, still deep. But in that section, they find chariot wheels, different things like that, bracelets and so on and so forth. There is stuff that's been found there, right? Used to be all over YouTube. You used to be able to find all kinds of videos on that. And there's a couple longer, boring videos of like one guy, he's like a guy from Holland, and he's with this businessman from Vietnam. And this guy from Vietnam, he funded this whole expedition down there and got all like the mapping and like the geographical mapping where it like shows like layers and stuff, like some pretty expensive stuff. Anyways, so they get over there. Well, they spend 40 years wandering in the wilderness because they send spies into the land of Canaan. And when they come back, Joshua and Caleb are two of the spies. When they come back, they report to them that there's giants in the land, right? There's giants in these huge cities, and they got these massive walls, like, and the, like the vegetation and everything like that. It's just crazy there. And it swallows up the inhabitants. And the men are huge, like, and basically the 10 guys are like, there ain't no way we're going in there and fighting these guys. They say like we're like grasshoppers to them, right? And we felt like grasshoppers to them. They specifically say that we look like grasshoppers to them, and we felt like grasshoppers to them, right? So, you know what I mean? If they're however tall they are, say they are 5'6", right? Well, if a guy's 6'5", he's pretty big, right? But you don't necessarily feel like a grasshopper, right? But if a guy's, 7 foot, right, you're gonna feel like a grasshopper. 7 foot and big, right? You're gonna feel like a grasshopper. So they were scared of these giants that inhabited the land, right? And in Genesis, it says, Genesis 6, there were giants in the land then and after that, right? There were giants in the land in those days and after. And as it shows, there were giants before the flood. There were giants after the flood. Okay? And how does that happen? Is it of angels? Is it of angels that came down and mated with women? That's an idea that's out there. But that idea, I think there's a psyop in that, because it wants you to believe something basically off-worldly, right? And people will believe that, but they won't believe that God, right, could make Mary pregnant, right? They'll believe that angels came down and mated with women, right, and made these giants, right, made Cyclops, but they won't believe that God was able to make Mary pregnant with Christ, right? So I'll explain more about the giants thing because I've looked at it all, right? And I'm not saying I've looked at it all and I know it all. I'm just my conclusion, because for a while I was definitely down the angels came to earth and the book of Enoch and all this stuff, right? Because pretty much everything that I talk about, most of this stuff at one point in time, I was like, I think this is it, right? Maybe not everything, but like there's a lot of these different ideas that I've taken the time to look into to find out if they were true. Just like the Bible, you're supposed to look at these things to find out they're true. Be a Berean who searches the scriptures daily to find out, to see if these things are true. So Robert Seffer, anthropologist, touches on many biblical subjects from a scientific perspective. Now, I don't know what the quotation marks are for, but I find sometimes when they say a scientific perspective, they'll try to find these really worldly ways to describe what the Bible is trying to say. When if you're somebody who believes the Bible, you're not looking for an actual description on how this thing can happen. Because again, if you believe in God, if you believe that God created, spoke the world out of existence, just like you believe that the Big Bang happened, right? Then you never seen it, but you believe it, right? There's things that I see every day. Like, we see what's going on around us every day, but I believe it a lot less, right? None of us believe what's going on, right? We understand that it's a huge deception and we can see it all, right? Well, God and Christ and the future can't really necessarily see it all, right? We see it coming together, but we have faith and hope in something that's far off that we can't understand. So if anything, I'm very much a long-term thinker, and I'm not thinking in the present in the sense that, oh, I could die. If I do this, I could die. If I do that, I could die. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And that's not a, fun thing to think about, because it's like, oh, if I die, then I'm going to be gone, and my kids and my wife is, I'm not going to be around for them, right? But at the same time, my wife also knows where I'm headed, right? Just like if I lost my wife, I know where she's headed, right? Same with my children. I'm not worried about that stuff, but it's still going to be very, very painful if anything would ever happen to them, or if anything would happen to me, right? So I'm not void of feeling or anything like that. You got to go through all this stuff, right? And that's the thing. People get confused because they'll hear people say, well, God's in control of all this, right? 100%. God is in 100% control. But things happen, and bad things happen to good people throughout history, all throughout history. Terrible, absolutely terrible things. People starving, people murdering each other, people raping each other, right? Mass genocide, right? Mass extermination campaigns. So yes, God is in control, but crazy stuff happens. And if you are a believer in the Bible, you know what man is capable of, because it's recorded throughout history. And one thing that I can see about today with the Bible is that nothing has changed. There's nothing new under the sun in how man acts and how man treats one another and how man thinks of himself, right? Man still thinks the same today as he did back then, right? And that's why, unless Christ returns and cuts this thing short, there'd be no flesh saved alive. Just like it says, if it were possible, the Antichrist would deceive the very elect. But that's not possible. And the Antichrist is looking to kill the elect, right? And if Christ doesn't return in time, then there'll be no elect saved alive. And if there's no elect saved alive, well, then there's no flesh saved alive. Okay? Because once he takes out his people, well, then the world's going to be getting judged. But he's not going to destroy the world, because he's going to have 144,000 chosen of Israel, of all the 12 tribes, on the earth as he's pouring out his judgment, right? And they're going to be like Moses and Elijah on this earth, right? Because they're going to be causing all kinds of problems. All kinds of problems. They're going to be preaching the gospel when they have most of us killed, right? So they didn't, gonna get back around here. So they didn't go into the promised land, right? They had the bad report. I got off talking about the giants and then on to the Antichrist. See, that's the thing. You can jump anywhere in the Bible and you'll lead back to Christ. You'll lead back to where you want to be. It's circular logic, man. No, it's God's word, right? And it's so consistent that you can literally go from one page to another page to another, and you're just going to be consistent the whole way through, right? The problem is that people don't take enough time to actually go through God's word and understand it. and they don't ask God to help them, right? You can't read it and not ask God to help you understand it. There's lots of stuff that I've read in this that I never understood. Lots of stuff that I read and I'm like, I don't know if I like this. Because there's lots of stuff in the Bible that people read. Not for me, turns me off, right? I'm fine with it, but lots of other people, right? Like you go through the Old Testament, just go through the Old Testament and that'll turn a lot of people off, right? But when you understand God, when you understand evil, when you understand why he sent his son, when you understand why his son's going to return one day, then you understand why God, and you understand history and whatnot, you understand why God is the way he is and why he does the things that he does. Because you can see history in the Bible, because it is cataloged through the children of Israel. Okay? And the funny thing is, there's a lot of crossing over with other people groups. There's lots of other people from different people groups in the Bible. That's why at the end, okay, at the end of all this, when Christ returns, there's still going to be nations. Not everybody is going to be completely wiped out, right? Because there's going to be many people that don't take the mark of the beast, but maybe they don't get saved either, right? But they are able to survive it, right? That's possible, because it says that those that are with Christ when he returns are going to be priests and kings. And what does that mean? It means that they're going to be given places of authority in ruling over the nations. Well, who's the nations? Well, the nations are the people that are still alive, that are still living. So you got to understand that there's actually going to come a time when there's people that are living and dying for 1,000 years during the 1,000-year reign of Christ, right? The real 1,000-year Reich, not associated with that Reich, okay? So when he's reigning for 1,000 years, there's going to be nations, and they're going to be living and dying, but they're going to be learning the ways of the Lord. And at the end of that 1,000 years, Satan, who is bound in a prison, will be released, and he will go out through the nations, deceive them one more time, and they will all gather themselves again against Christ, against Israel. Okay? But that's not the Israel that people think of today. Okay? That's a totally different Israel that's way off into the future. So I'm not going to spend much time there. The thing is, if someone tries to understand the book of Revelation and they hear me talk about these things and they haven't read it, they're not familiar with the Bible, they're going to be like, what is he talking about? What is the point of it? Right? And that's a part where I get kind of lost, that I take for granted that people don't know that much about the Bible, because I think there's a lot of people that are just unfamiliar with the Bible in general. They know parts of the Bible, they know pieces of scripture, but they in general don't understand the Bible. I think they're trying to. I do believe they're trying to, but I don't think they fully understand. I don't think they know even to ask God to help them understand the Bible, understand God's word, right? Help me believe it, help me understand it, help me learn it, so I can determine whether or not I truly believe it or not. Because there's no point in playing along with this, right? There's no point in playing church. There's no point in playing religious, right? That doesn't get you anywhere. That is usually the problem with most people. That's usually how they become lukewarm, right? That's how they become ineffective, and that's how I think a lot of people get turned away from the church too, because they see the church and they think, oh, those people are hypocrites because they're supposed to be so good. Well, maybe you shouldn't also think that everybody that you should understand that everybody falls short, right? But people that are supposed to be religious, that's the thing. They are being Nicolaitans, right? People that go to church but they don't seem any different from the world. When you get people in the world who seem way more separated from the world, and they look at the church and they say, "Jumpins, you guys are a lot like the world. What's going on here?" Right? So that's where, you know, I like to come in because I grew up really, blue collar, grew up from the woods, country boy. And I never seen myself as a super religious person. Always found myself on the wrong side of things with people at church and stuff. I was just always, maybe asked a little too many questions and was a little bit too aggressive. Always, quick to, run and jump feet first into something. And so I spent a lot of my time in and out of church because I just never felt like I belonged, right? And couldn't help it. But I always felt like I belonged, with God. But I had a hard time in church. And I think a lot of dudes can relate to that. You have a hard time going to church and sitting there and thinking, what's the point of all this, right? And a lot of churches, they've lost their fire. They've gone not even cold. They've just gone lukewarm. They've just gone the way of the world. And again, if you're outside and looking for something, and then you open a church door and you're like, this just seems like a, self-help sermon, or this just seems like something that I could find something better on YouTube from a secular scholar or an atheist scholar or something like that, right? It's like, you've got this whole book here, and some of these guys barely even preach from it. But you know what? A lot of those guys were also put in place. They crept in unawares. They went off to Bible school, and they were taught these things. And they were taught not to use the Bible. They were taught not to know the scriptures. They were taught that, people just can't understand the scriptures, so don't bother preaching to them. Don't bother teaching them. They just won't get it. And it's like, that's the worst thing to do. What stupid logic is that? You imagine it's like, well, they'll just never get it, so don't teach them right from wrong. Really? And that's what the church has become in a lot of ways. And that's why the church is dropping the ball. And when I say the church, I mean what's seen as the institution. Because the church is the body of Christ, which is made up of people. Okay? The church as the institution is what everybody sees as basically the logos for Christianity, right? All the different logos. When somebody first thinks Christianity, the first thing that comes to their minds, right? Those initial images, like Adam Green trying to look like Christ, right? So they talk about Adam Kadmon, okay? And just to finish that other thing up first. So when they wander in the wilderness, I go way off again, guys. So they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years because 10 of them said, we can't go in that land. Caleb and Joshua said, with God, we can go in there. And God said, nope, because you guys are doubting me after I did everything that I did for you in Egypt, after I crushed Pharaoh in the sea, and you're worried about these guys over here? You don't think that I can move them? You don't think I can bring those walls down? Right? So God's mad. Wouldn't you be like, think about it. It's like when you explain something to your kids and you explain it and you show them, step 1, step 2, step 3, and you show them all the ways, and they're like, wow, Dad, you do that really well, and so on and so forth, and they're amazed at, and you're showing them, and they're like, wow, this is cool, I can't wait to do this, right? And then you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna go inside now. I'll leave you to it, kid. And you go in, and then you peek out the window, and it's just like chaos, right? The kid's already, got the bike upside down, and they got their leg twisted around, and it's not a good scene. Well, that's basically what the children of Israel were like. It's like God showed them all the miracles in Egypt, led them out with a high, hard hand, right? And then they're like, oh, we're not going in there, right? So God said, you're going to wander for 40 years until that doubting generation, basically anybody above Caleb and Joshua's age, until that generation dies. Until every one of them is dead, you're not going in there, right? And so they wandered in the wilderness, and God fed them in the wilderness, and they griped and complained in the wilderness for those 40 years. But if they wouldn't have griped and complained in the first place, and they wouldn't have wandered those 40 years, and they wouldn't have had to gripe for 40 years, right? And God stuck with them. God stayed with them the whole time. He's like, my goodness, I'm gonna literally have to drag you guys across this desert, right? He did too, right? He led them, right? When Moses brought them the 10 Commandments, when they built the Ark of the Covenant, right? What went before them? The Ark of the Covenant. It went ahead of them, right? Cloud of smoke, pillar of fire went before them. God always went before them, showed them the way, right? Because he was showing them something, and through them, eventually, it would show the world the light onto the nations. And then eventually, from them, one would come who would be the light unto the nations, right? But the world didn't recognize him when they came, and they still don't recognize him. But one is going to come in his name that everybody's going to recognize. And then when that happens, then he will come. Right? So all that, they wandered for 40 years. And then finally, they said, okay, guys, it's time to go in. And when you go in, you got to kill everybody. Because the 400 years, the iniquity of the Amorites, don't quote me on that year number, the iniquity of the Amorites was fulfilled. And what was that iniquity? Well, they reached the tipping point of their civilization, right? They had giant cities, great walls. They were great warriors. They were decadent, right? They had all kinds of nice things. And what were they starting to do? They were sacrificing children, right? They were sacrificing people to their gods, because that's what all civilizations end up doing. They end up worshiping gods that are all about degeneracy and all about just the worst things, abominations that man could think of. And when a nation gets to that point, God sends another nation that's unknown to them in to clean up house. And he's done it time and time and again throughout history. Time and time again. And he's doing it right now. He's going to do it again after. So, Abraham had that dream all that time ago. All of Genesis and the whole story of the Israelites, it's all based on Abraham was given a dream, was told to come out of the Ur of Chaldees, went to Canaan, went to Egypt, dwelt there. All this stuff happened, right? And then finally they went in the land, and then they had to conquer the land. They got into many battles, slayed many peoples, but they didn't slay everybody. They had, who was it? The Canaanite, the Hivite, the Jebusite, the Perizzite, Amalekite, the Amorite. 7 nations. Anyways, and among them were the Rephaim. Who were the Rephaim? The giants. There's literally a place called the Valley of the Giants, right? Agabashan, Agabation, he was giant. Goliath, he had 4 brothers, right? David, 5 little stones he took, right? See, they were in Israel. They conquered these other nations that worshipped all these other gods, the gods of the mountains, the gods of the valleys, the gods below the earth, the gods above the earth, right? The gods of the sea, right? The gods of the air. They worshipped all the gods, right? They worshipped the phallus. They worshipped the vagina, right? Baal, Ashtoreth, right? They worshipped all these things. So all of these idols and these pagan deities were already in the land. And they would have come and they would have slain these things. And they would have burnt them, right? And destroyed them utterly, completely. Everything about them, destroyed them. But then there was nations that they left and they didn't quite root them all out. So those nations then dwelt with them. And because they left that remnant, right? Then what eventually happened? Those pagan cultures eventually contaminated their culture. And then they started worshiping Baal, Ashtoreth, Shemosh, the abomination of Moab. They did all these things, and then history will say, well, the Israelites, the Hebrews were actually worshiping multiple gods when they were in the land of Canaan. And there's, evidence of this based on these different artifacts, so on and so forth. And it's like, yeah, no, they did. They totally did, because the people of the land were pagan. And when Israel was following God, they destroyed the idols. They didn't have anything to do with them. But then when they started being oppressed by these different groups, or started mixing in with these groups, or they started leaving off the laws of the Lord, well, they started bringing in the gods. They started worshiping other gods. They started doing the things that the other nations did. Because why? They liked what they saw from the other nations. Why? Because Israel, when they went in and they had the land, they separated the 12 tribes and all the families in those tribes. And everybody had their own parcel of land. Everybody had their own little parcel of land. And then the Levites, they had their parcels of land throughout the kingdom, because they traveled around, they were the priests. Okay? So it was made up of autonomous places, right? Autonomous zones owned by families that all had their part, all had their own inheritance. Okay? They all had their own inheritance, and they had laws based on basically if, different things happen in time, hardships happen. Some people benefit, some people have a hard time. Some people really benefit, some people go really downhill, right? So some people get indebted to other people. Some things don't work out for some people. Some people have more children than others. Some people only have girls. Some people have a lot of boys. Like, different things happen. And then after every 50 years, they'd have a Jubilee year where they basically reset all their debt and so on and so forth. And how they live, what kind of system? They didn't have any kings, but they had judges that would rise up when man would begin to do what was right in their own eyes, and they began leaving off the law of the Lord, when they began seeking after other gods, when they began seeking after the other nations, right? And they would start getting corrupt and bringing in the things of the world. Well, then they would start being oppressed. Then they would start noticing their country turning upside down, and calamities started happening, right? Their country being overwhelmed with, people that are not local, people that don't have the same ideals as you, people that don't have the same values as you, people that don't worship the same God as you, people that, like stuff like killing babies, people that, like Drag Time Story Hour, right? People that want lenient sentences for pedophiles and, want harsh sentences for anybody that questions the government, right? When wicked men lead, then good men hide themselves. But it's kind of getting time where we don't hide ourselves anymore. Getting off topic with saying that, but That's what happened in Israel, because it's all a shadow of what's happening today. So when I talk about the Bible, too, guys, I hope you understand the nuances in a lot of my statements too, and how the Bible is reflecting things that are happening in the world today and how society is, how the culture is, what happens in the culture, and what happened with Israel every time they degenerated away from God, right? They got into Baal worship. And what did they do in Baal worship? They had temples of Baal, and they had priests and priestesses of Baal, right? And what did they do in the temple of Baal? Porn. Pornea. That's what they did. You would go, you'd have sex with the priestess, right? They had orgies, they do all this stuff. They worshipped in the groves. They literally worshipped phalluses. Okay? They literally worship giant vaginas and things that look like vaginas. Like, they did all kinds of crazy degenerate stuff, like what we're seeing today, right? The worshipers of Baal and Ashtoreth, right? Are we there already? 1 hour and 11 minutes, PC battery running low. How much time do we got? 10 minutes, 10%, 9 minutes remaining. So I'd give that really about 5 minutes before it gives me the warning. So they worshipped other gods. And then historians will say, well, they weren't always a monotheistic people. They worshipped other gods, as evidenced by here. Yeah, of course they did. Some fell away, right? Like today, people that say they're Christians, but they're living like the world, or they don't even believe the Bible, right? Are they actually Christian? It's like not all those who say they are of Israel are of Israel. Okay? Not all those who say they're Jews are of the synagogue of Satan. Okay? You know one thing about Jews? The only person who knows who the Jews are in the world, like truly, is God, right? The 12 tribes. Who you can't pin down the 12 tribes. Why? Because when the northern kingdom was destroyed, when the Assyrians came in, what they do? Because the Assyrians had the thing that they did to everybody was they came in, they take you out of your home, take you out of your country, go and mingle you with other people, force you to basically rape you and force you to be with other groups, right? Basically breed out that group of people and mix them up with other people, and then repopulate. They redistributed the northern kingdom. They literally plucked the people up, took it out, and put different people in the land. But then when there was all these beasts and everything like that came and was like attacking everybody and killing everybody and causing a lot of problems, they ended up bringing some people back to teach them some of the ways, right? But they were never a full people again. But God knows who has connections to what, right? God knows. And that's another thing too. Is anybody know why all of the blood testing and the genetic testing and the where are your roots? You understand what that's all for? They're trying to figure out who's who and who's from where, from what tribe. Actually, 23andMe, that's one. Brandon Glock. I always want to call you Glock. That's cool though. Call you Glock, Brandon Glock, Braden Glock. Like, Fritz Bar, how's it going, buddy? Well, guys, this is gonna die here. I've been going on for a while. 7 minutes. I got a few minutes. Braden likes the Glock comment. I would too, right? It's like when I used to work in corrections, they used to call me Pistol Pete, and that was a good name to have, Pistol Pete. Pistol Pete. And everybody called me Pete. It was always Pete. It was never Peter. Never Peter. Always Pete. Let's go, Brandon. I seen, before we go, landing on a good note. I seen the Simpsons one where it's like are they saying Boo Earns? But they switch it and say, are they saying fuck Joe Biden? No, they're saying let's go Brandon. And then last moment, I was saying let's go Brandon. Oh, I'm dying. Guys,